My message is, I think, that the government class, our elite class, yes, they hate us. No, they're not good at their jobs. And no one is coming to save you. There's not necessarily an order to the madness that can be explained by, by a vast conspiracy theory. Now, I think there are definitely conspiracies, for sure, but they operate on a smaller level. When you have one conspiracy theory that explains everything, it is more than likely not true, and more than likely speaking to a deep need in the believer.
I want to talk about the hate you're describing, like i.e. the elite class hates us. I've heard people say that, and I've also heard people say, no, this is just a political ploy. It's there isn't deep emotion involved here. This is just simply a power play and marginalization of the political group that we're not aligned with. How do you see that?
I think there's definitely hate from the point of view of the elites, that the hate that the elites have of most of the country. At this point, it's very obvious. Twitter has been amazing for this because you see it raw and unvarnished. I mean, heck, you can now see it on broadcast TV. You see it on The View every night or every day. You see it on MSNBC and CNN all the time. There is a palatable amount of contempt that these people have for their political enemies. All of these people, as a few folks have said, all of these people at the end of the day, the left, let's say the mainstream left, has all bought into the old Marcuse idea of repressive tolerance, which is that in the service of our ideology, they're all fascists. We don't allow fascists to speak. And, once you've defined half the country as fascist, and once you've said half the country then has no right to speak, and these opinions are not legitimate political disagreements, and speech is violence, by the way, then you sort of have a moral obligation, or not a moral, but an intellectual obligation, ideological obligation, to follow through on this stuff. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the necessary consequence of, let's say, radical left thought over the last 50 years, really in full bloom. And really it's terrifying, because I always say, if they believe 50% of what they say, we're in a lot of trouble as a society.
To me, it strikes me that there's these political operatives. Like, someone wrote President Biden's speech. He didn't write that. I mean, I'm pretty sure, right? Someone wrote that.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
In fact, I think he was backpedaling on it the next day. And so there's a kind of a political motivation to all of this that is, you're saying, you think that hate and contempt are the primary motivators here? Do I understand that right?
No, I think that's the flowering of the necessary, it's the flowering, the necessary consequence of their ideology. I mean, they've been put into a box, or they've put themselves into a box where they say that, we are fascists and punch a Nazi, and, of course, they're the ones who decide who is the Nazi, they're the ones who decide who's the fascist on an ever-shifting scale. And so we're in a cold civil war. I believe personally that the country is coming apart in an irreparable way, and that we are at the end of kind of this American experience. How that is going to take shape in the future is an open question. But I don't think we can come back from this. I don't think an election or anything like that can come back from this, because the basis of our disagreement, I think, is a disagreement on the concept of justice. And every civilization needs to agree at the very basic level, what is justice? And justice, as the West has traditionally understood it since the Enlightenment, is equal justice. You and I, we may be from different backgrounds, we may commit a crime. Our different backgrounds have no bearing on whether or on our guilt. For half the country now, I mean, we say that that's right and proper, and in fact, that's really the only way to run a civilized country that is fair for all the people. The left has rejected that, and in favor of group rights and in favor of group conceptions of social justice. So it really turns that on its head, and now this particular understanding of justice has infected every bit of society. There's so many examples every day that pop up to really illustrate this, to the point where we just kind of shrug our shoulders when we say, oh, it's a Trump supporter who's facing a jury in Washington, D.C., or a conservative. Well, yeah, that person obviously isn't going to get a fair trial. And we say it like it's not a big deal, but in fact it is a big deal, because the basis of our country and our civilization is that, yes, that person should be able to get a fair shake, because the people should decide on things that are not related to clan or race or politics or religion or whatever. And so I think once that's eroded, you don't just get it back. You have to suffer the consequences of that erosion.
I don't really actually think it's half the country that believes in this alternate model of justice. I think it's a much smaller but very fervent group. And then there's some portion of the people that just kind of go along to get along, right? What do you think?
You're probably right. The number of people who think about it in these terms is probably very, very small. But that said, I mean, I think it's a larger group than you may think. Not explicitly endorsing a two-tier justice system, but who kind of de facto say, okay. I mean, we tried in this country, we tried very hard explicitly to overcome these types of prejudices when it came to different ethnic groups. And we understood that it is something that should be overcome. It's like, if you are of a certain race, you are allowed to say something where someone, of another race cannot say the same word, even if even if kind of all things are equal. Some school district, I think in Michigan or somewhere, they said, or Minnesota, when we cut our budgets, we're going to cut the white teachers first. I mean, this would have been crazy, unfathomable not long ago, but here we are. And as you said, it's so ingrained in our elites and in the elite mentality that through the elites it infects many other things, and it does so through social media and journalism and all that stuff. But I'm not sure how you defeat this particular point of view with the elites, other than to appeal to the folks who have this kind of old-fashioned, very American conception of equal justice, to like say, no, this is an important thing that we need to hold on to.